help you. We at Toastmasters for Professionals are committed for helping you to grow in your professional and personal life. Today, this session is all about your growth. I, Raghunatha Raju, and we have other people who are committed for this club, which is Toastmaster Ashwin Patel. Ashwin, can you say hi?
Hello, everybody.
And then DTM Susan. Susan, can you raise your hand? We as a team are committed for this club and are going to help you later after the Speechcraft. But right now, it's all about having fun in these 4 sessions. We have exciting program lined up. Let me pass the control to this young and charming friend, Toastmaster Ashwin, to proceed with the session.
What?
Ashwin.
Welcome, everybody. I know it's a Saturday evening, but you know what? Give yourself a hand for coming here, and you're going to learn a lot today and the 4 weeks that you're going to be here. We have some amazing speech coordinators and mentors for you, and an excellent speaker that I know well, too. So get your ears open, get your self-learning open, and learn everything you can. Ask questions. It's going to be a great 4 weeks. But before I get started, I would like to tell our sponsor for today, Toastmasters for Professionals. Toastmasters for Professionals is a proposed online club based out of California, USA, and focuses on skills related to resume interview preparation, career guidance, interpersonal communication, effective communication, and boosting confidence. Ooh, critical thinking and handling difficult situations. So if you are interested, please, we are happy to have you there. The core value systems, compassion and empathy nurtured at one's home has a huge impact on an individual's professional life. So we are having a meeting at this Tuesday, and I will put it out in the chat for you guys to check it out. So come and check it out. It's going to be a great session. Well, before I begin, I want to tell you about our speaker today. He is a full-time dad. He was a past Division B director and ran many Ironmans. I think he does one every month. His goals. He's a machine, and he's a professional coach. So please help me welcome Stephen Nosek.
Thank you, Ashwin. I don't know how to repay you for your kind words. Now, good evening, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Now, as Ashwin said, I have a wealth of background within personal development, speaking, and I'm also an athlete on the side. We could ask all those questions later on because I know you'll be interested in some of those. But tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you craft a speech, a good speech, in less than 10 minutes. I'm going to cover a brand new technique that I've been using for the last 3.5 years, not just in Toastmasters. This works in every facet of your life. Now, what do I mean by that? So in my career, my day job, quote unquote, I'm a professional project and program manager. I do a lot of collecting of requirements and information from all different kinds of stakeholders around the globe. From that information, I assemble it, I churn out bullet points, and then I get up in front of executive leaders and I present different proposals. All of these things, just like you in your profession, have to be done fast, on the spot, and as accurate as possible. And in most cases, with probably only about 20 to 30% of the actual information needed, right? Because we don't always have everything we need right when we get on stage. And that's the best part, is this is going to be a lot of fun. You're going to learn a little bit about me, but you're going to be able to take away this technique and use it when you get into the breakout rooms and beyond. So by a show of hands, who's ready to get started? Learn a little bit about crafting a speech in 10 minutes or less. Okay, I see a wide variety of hands up. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me. I may be technically challenged, but it's all right. We'll make it happen anyways. And Let's see here. Can I get someone to raise their hand that they could see the light bulbs on the screen? Okay, perfect. Now, I know all of you are probably great at speech writing. I know when I started, I spent hours upon hours upon hours trying to just craft my icebreaker speech that was 4 to 6 minutes long, right? And I'd write out all these notes and pages, and then I'd pick them up and I'd throw them away, and I didn't know what to do. And then I came across a new technique that I'm going to share with you tonight that I found to be invaluable. I still use it today, and I teach it to every one of my students. Now, let me ask you a question. Does this look familiar to you when you get in front of your piece of paper and you're writing out a speech? You got 20, 30, 50, 70 different revisions. Sometimes it's so overwhelming, you don't know where to begin. You could have a great topic in mind and you want to break it down into digestible points, but then your mind starts going down a rabbit hole because you might be too deep in the weeds, or maybe your content is way too far off and nobody's going to understand. And remember, if you're like me, we all want to give these perfect speeches. We all want to make sure that it resonates with everybody in front of us. But you know what? Today's piece of paper and that idea you had to write tomorrow's speech, I got to start from scratch. And over time, that affects all of us, not just in Toastmasters, but everywhere else. So I know most of you probably think about speech writing like this, and that's all right, because I do too. Sometimes it's scary. Now, when I first started writing speeches, as I mentioned a moment ago, I did it long form. I literally would write a college essay, and that was my speech. And I'd get so frustrated when I'd get up and I'd stand in front of the podium or in front of the boardroom, and I'd start giving the speech. And if I forgot the way it was written on the paper, I got flustered. Does that happen to you? I see some heads nodding. It still happens to me today. We're not alone. That's the good news. Now, let's talk about the 3-cube technique. And the reason why I'm calling it the 3-cube technique, well, there's 3 areas, and then there's going to be 3 other things to consider. And then there's going to be 3 opportunities for you to take advantage of this. So how does it really start? I'm going to break it down as simple as possible. By all means, if you do have a question, raise your hand. If I can't see you, Ashwin or another moderator, just unmute yourself and let me know. First, we're going to start with an idea. This is essentially your topic. Based on your topic, you're going to break it down into some points. And then afterwards, you're going to assemble all of the points together into a story fashion. And we're going to get deeper into that in just a few minutes. Now, I know a lot of you have probably been in Toastmasters for quite some time, so I'm going to recite some information you probably already know, but it's a good reminder when it comes to speech writing. And that's called the rule of 3. Tell them what you're going to tell them, essentially your introduction. Tell them, that's your body. Tell them what you told them. That is your summary and your conclusion. Now, why is it important that I want to start back with some fundamental stuff? It's because the more often you tell someone the same information, the more likely they are to digest it, interpret it, and they'll get some value out of it, right? Think about how many times you log into your social media platforms or you drive by a billboard and you see these ads pop up, right? You know how many times they pop up before you as a consumer actually make a decision? It's typically between 9 and 12 times. But when you're talking to someone, like I'm talking with you now, you only have to be in these 3 points, right? Tell them what you're going to talk about, tell them what it is, and then just recap and remind them what you just told them. The rest of communication is going to be brought out, and all the nonverbal stuff, my hand movements, my eyes, my gestures, inflection and voice, all the other things that we learn about in Toastmasters and beyond. But I just wanted to start here because this is the 3-cubed technique. Now let's go in, and a lot of you might already be aware of the simple speech outline. But the template you see in front of you, it's going to be easy to fill out. Like I said, you could do this in under 10 minutes. Speech writing doesn't have to be hard. First and foremost, you got an introduction. What is an introduction? It's your opportunity to grab the attention of the people that are going to be listening to you. Plain and simple. During that introduction, you're going to build some credibility. Who are you? What is the subject matter? And do you have some authority about what you're talking about? You got some back-end experience, right? And then the last piece of the introduction is you're going to give them a preview, or essentially what I like to say, you're going to leave a little breadcrumbs. I'm going to tell you about X, Y, and Z, right? There's the first part of rule of 3. Now in the middle, we got the body. Well, in here, we're going to keep things simple. 3 points max. Now you could go a little more or a little less, but just remember, just like I'm telling you now, I've already planted the word 3 in your head about 10 times. At the end of this, you're going to remember that because I keep repeating it. If you start to have more points, like if you get 5 and beyond, think through how many times you've heard someone give you 5 points, and at the end of it, you can't remember the first or the second one, maybe the third one. You definitely got the 5th one, unless you decided to divert your attention somewhere else. So keep that in mind. Keep it very simple when you're writing. Now, the next piece in the body is relevant examples. And typically, you're going to use 1 to 3 examples. They don't have to be long. They could be very short and succinct. And then the last piece in the body is the transition. And this, as a secret, is where you guide and navigate your audience to where you're going next. For example, we just covered the body. I am now going to move us over into the conclusion area, right? I just gave you an instruction or a cue. You're now following me. So think through that when you're writing your body, is you want to have some sort of transitional phrase to get people to follow the message. And finally, the conclusion. Very simple. You're going to wrap it up. You're going to highlight and remind people why you started talking about the introduction. You're going to tell them about the 3 points very succinctly. And then you're just going to wrap it up. My favorite thing to do in that at the end is to add a call to action. Calls to action are very important. And here's why, is it's your opportunity to get the audience to take action or make a decision about what you're talking about. So for example, at the conclusion of our speech or my presentation today, I'm going to ask you to send me an email. My email is in the bottom footer. You will see it there on every single slide. I'm already telling you what I'm going to ask you to do at the end. But it's very important because if you go and you sit in enough meetings and you listen to people's speeches, the ones that usually leave the impression usually close with something that keeps you thinking about what they're talking about. That's because they put a call to action into place. It could be a question, it could be a bold statement, or it could even be some other kind of direction that you might want to check out. Even as simple as in, click the like button below, subscribe to my YouTube channel, or leave me a comment, right? That's something we hear every single day when we turn on a podcast or a YouTube channel or something else, right? Call to action in your speech is going to be huge because you're going to use it everywhere else. Now, I know a lot of you may be a little confused. So Stephen, we just talked about the background of a speech. We talked about 3 cubed. Where am I going to start? Does anyone remember the first point of 3 cubed? Unmute yourself, call it out.
Idea.
Oh, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Thank you very much. Awesome. Now, that's absolutely right. Now, to get into the technique, I'm going to tell you a little story. And it's actually the speech I wrote. It will take a little less than 10 minutes. But it goes something like this. When I was a young kid, my family used to go to San Francisco once a year. And every time we went to Fisherman's Wharf, there was this sweet smell of French bread in the air. It came from Boudin's. Boudin, the master baker, is on our screen today. holding several loaves of sourdough bread. Now, the reason why I mention that is because this is something familiar to me. I have knowledge and experience about it. I know different intricate details about it. This is going to be my idea. It's the topic I'm going to talk about. You see, I love French bread. I love sourdough bread. And I really love that smell because it transports me back to when I was a little kid. It's easy to remember for me. And as you could tell, I'm quite passionate about talking about bread making. Now, in your world, you may have a different topic. If in your professional life, maybe you're a software engineer, a sales development expert, maybe a real estate agent, librarian, or maybe you're a professional Toastmaster like Ashvin. It doesn't matter what it is, you are very knowledgeable about that area. Today in your breakout session, choose a topic you're familiar with. You're going to know the ins and outs of it more than anybody else on this call. And that's key because remember, as audience members, sometimes we don't know what's going to come out of the person's mouth next. So don't be afraid when you write your speech. Choose something familiar. Now, let's get into the idea. Remember, the next part in the 3-cube technique is to choose 3 points. So my main idea is sourdough bread. I'm going to talk about what I like about sourdough bread, but not just that. I'm going to talk about how to make it and what it means to me. Because remember, it's a memory I have. So I'm very fond to that. So I have points 1, 2, and 3. Very simply put, all I need to do is write down what my point 1 is. Well, I'll give you a hint on the next slide. And then point number 2, what's the next thing that I want to talk about? And as always, point number 3, this is the other main key point about my idea about talking about sourdough bread. So I'm going to share this template with you. Now, as I mentioned in speech writing, there's 3 key parts. Now, there could be different parts depending on the type of speech or story that you're going to tell or presentation, but we'll use this as all intensive purposes because it's universal. Now, my idea, as I mentioned, is sourdough. So I'm going to talk about sourdough, but I'm going to attack the very hardest part of speech writing first. And that is, what are my 3 bullet points? Or I should say 3 points of my speech. The first one, I'm going to talk about the ingredients. So flour, water, salt, yeast, right? There's my examples. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the process of preparation or mixing the ingredients together, letting them sit in a refrigerator for X amount of hours, etc. Number 3, oh, I put up 4 fingers. Sorry about that. My mistake. I'm only human. Number 3, we're going to talk about the cooking process, right? 375, center rack, 45 or 40 to 45 minutes, right? Very crisp bullet points. Notice I haven't overthought what I'm trying to write about. I'm not worried about how to phrase the words early on in giving the speech. Because at the end of this, you're going to see this template on the screen. And it's very easy to tell a story if you just look at the main points on it, opposed to trying to read a full sheet of paper that's 5 paragraphs long, because you're going to get flustered if you're dyslexic or you miss a point somewhere. I've done it countless times. And then your speech goes bad, or maybe it didn't go bad, but you feel bad about it, right? So this is how you could go through easily and build 3 key points, right? So as I mentioned before, ingredients, how to assemble or cook them together. I got tongue-tied on there. Number 2, how to prepare them. And then number 3, how to cook them. My bad. Now, we just got done with the hardest part of speech writing. It's the core content. The easiest part will be the conclusion, but we'll start with the introduction. So remember, introduction, this is about grabbing the attention of your audience. Well, I already told you this story. It's a memory. I'm going to start with that. Or maybe I'm going to start with a quote. or maybe a bold statement. Or I might just preface it as in, I was walking down the street earlier today and someone opened the door for me as I entered the building, right? You could use any kind of opening just like you do today in everyday conversation. Now, number 2 in my introduction, because remember, 3 cubes, so I got 3 points on each of these boxes. That memory sparks something. I want to try to recreate it at home. That's why I'm giving my speech. So I'm going to tell you about what ingredients I use, how I prepare it, and how I bake it. That's all my introduction is, right? Pretty simple, very easy. But you know what? You could interchange this with whatever you want to talk about. Now let's move on. Now, like I said, we're going to move in to the easiest part, or the summary part. Well, what do you do in the summary? Well, you just recap what you talked about in the first 2 sections. Guess what? The bread just came out. It smells awesome. It reminds me of when I was that young kid in San Francisco visiting with my family every single year. That's the start of my conclusion. Now, I just told you about, I'm going to take flour, water, salt, yeast. I'm going to mix them together, dry and then wet ingredients. I'm going to turn on the oven, let it preheat, put it in the center rack. And this bread was done in 40 to 45 minutes. Pretty simple, right? Now, here's that last part we talked about, that call to action. If you have your favorite recipe for sourdough bread, send me an email. It's down below. I'd love to hear how you enjoy that sourdough bread. See, what you might not realize is that speech I just gave was about 7.5 minutes long. And it's all based on this content in front of you. I didn't overthink what I had to talk about. I didn't write very long sentences. Yes, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to phrase them and practice it. But I've gotten away from writing all my speeches long form because I've accepted the fact that I'm going to fumble somewhere if I'm trying to read every word on my page, right? I might drop my cue cards a bunch of times and they're mixed up. But this right here, this has been instrumental in everything that I've done, moving up in the corporate ladder, taking on leadership roles within Toastmasters, and then becoming a professional coach to people just like you that want to improve their communication leadership skills as well. Now, I want to show you an example of what was on my screen when I gave this presentation before. That's how easy it is to write a speech. It doesn't have to be that hard. So we have introduction, body, conclusion. Remember, main topic, we're talking sourdough bread. Here's my 3 points on the introduction. It's about that sweet smell. I want to recreate that. Here's the steps I'm going to take people through. And then your body, how do you bake the bread or prepare the bread? And then you have the ingredients, the process, and then the cooking apparatus, conclusion, recall, memory, and summary. Now think through, because we're in a virtual reality world at the moment, if you will. If you had this note on the side of your page, how easy is that to give a speech? And if you get tripped up, you just look at the keywords on your page. You're not holding a long script. Let me share something with you that you don't realize that I had. Is this guy right here. There's my whole speech without looking at what's on the page, right? So you could take what I've done today and put it on a sheet of paper and just use keywords and flow through the story because you're the one that has the most intimate relationship to that topic. You know it better than everybody else. It shouldn't be hard to form all these words. Now I'm going to pause there for a minute. We're at about 21 minutes. What I want to do is I want someone to unmute themselves. I want to do an exercise with this audience where you're going to provide me a topic and we'll build a speech in record time. Who's up for this challenge?
Hi, Stephen.
Yes.
I will try from my side, Stephen.
Okay.
So the topic should be organic food.
Okay.
So in introduction, what I can say is, according to you, who is rich in this world?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the statement there.
Yes, Stephen. What I am putting here is, according to, I'm just asking the audience that,
Okay.
according to you people, who is rich in this world? So the person who is healthy, he is rich in world, apart from the one who is having money. So again, I'm unable to move forward.
Yeah, health is wealth.
Yes.
Health is wealth.
So, yeah. After this, I'm unable to move forward. How to pick up this one?
Okay, no problem. Watch this. We're going to bring this on. Sorry about that. Screen sharing is stopped. Let me pull this back up 1 second here. And let's see if you can see my screen. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to take the topic of organic food, right? Organic food. So actually the first part that you're going to want to start is in the body. What are the topics that you want to cover when it comes to organic food? Maybe it's you want to talk about that organic food is grown in a certified environment where they're not using pesticides, where everything has to follow a certain guideline, right? So you might talk about guidelines, for example, as one, right? Because it's preparation of that. The next one, you may want to talk about nutritional value, right? Because we all know that if there's no chemicals in the food, you're getting the closest to Mother Nature in the types of minerals and vitamins that are within organic foods. Now, next, you might want to talk about health conditions or preventative measures, et cetera, right? Those could be your topics there that you might talk about. Now, I do like what you said just a minute ago, is you posed a question, right? Who is the richest people in the world, right? I kind of understood what you were saying there. And you were talking about, well, it's the people that have the most healthy habits and that consume the healthiest foods, right? So maybe your second bullet point is healthy habits or healthy foods, right? So that's your introduction. And then now, your third bullet is, well, I'm going to tell you about the guidelines. If I could spell, I can't spell. We're going to talk a little bit about nutrition because I know that you have, you're a nutritionist and you have a lot of information there. So I'm just going to abbreviate. And then you're going to talk about the health benefits, right? So that's your first part. And then when it comes to the conclusion, well, it could be something as simple as in, remember when I told you that the richest people in the world are also the healthiest? Well, guess what? You could be the wealthiest person when it comes to your health, right? You could just spin the question backwards. So then you're going to summarize what those points are. Well, remember, if it's organic food, you got to make sure that it fits all the, or I'm sorry, it checks all the boxes or dots the I's and crosses the T's when it comes to how things are produced as far as organic food, right? Because there's a certification process. You could talk about the healthy benefits, right? So organic food is better for the digestion system, as an example. And then the last piece is how many of you have more interest in going organic or just changing from a conventional fruit? Those are those that are produced with pesticides, et cetera, if you weren't familiar with that. Or those that are more interested in organic foods, please send me an email or reach out to me, right? So if I look at my stopwatch over here, we built based off your rough topic in about 6 minutes or less, right? And I don't have too much information other than I did work for Whole Foods for about a year as a produce clerk. So I kind of know a little bit about organic food and fruits and vegetables, which is great. Thanks, I'll pay you later on Venmo for planting the seed there. But this is how you could go about using this particular template to take a topic that you might have that you're passionate about, whether if it's organic food, sourdough bread, maybe it's about some sort of script that you're writing for the software that your company produces, right? It could be any one of those things. But like I said before, if you have more questions on this, we're going to open up everybody's mic right now. You could feel free to ask, raise your hand, post it in the chat. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Or my email is at the bottom of that. If you want a copy of this presentation, send me an email and I will send it to you. And I'll answer any other questions that you may have via email as well. Now, I'm going to just jump right in here because I know time is valuable. I got a little thing up here. And let's see, we got a hand raise, and I believe it is Soraka. Is that how that's pronounced? You're welcome to unmute yourself.
I think it is Ankit. The prefix was my name because I'm the speech coordinator.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't pick up on that either. Mohan, is that how that your name's pronounced?
Yeah, Mohan. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes,
Hey,
you
Stephen.
had a question. Hey.
Yeah, one question. So, regarding summary, how are we going to build the summary? I always get some confusion here. I told the introduction, I gave the body. Again, in conclusion, what is that I need to summarize? Again, I just covered guidelines, nutrition, health, or how to frame it. That's.
Oh, okay. How to frame it? That's a good question.
Yeah.
So what I've done, and there's several different ways to do it. This may not be the best. It could be unorthodox. It could be orthodox. It could be a mixture of both. But there is a lot of different ways to close a speech. Now, if we look at this, the summary could be, remember our transition from talking about healthy or preventative measures or healthy lifestyles, et cetera. It could be as simple as we just covered all the background that I want you to hear about organic food. First, we talked about the guidelines and how everything has to be certified and very tightly controlled. Next, we covered the nutritional value and benefits of organic food. And 3, we talked about how eating organic food can be very preventative and longevity of your life or something like that. That literally is your quick summary, right? That's one way to do it, where you just essentially are repeating the points, right? Remember the rule of 3. Tell them what you're gonna tell them. Tell them.
Yeah.
Tell
That
them
I
what you
understand.
told them.
So
Yeah.
a summary in this case, now I understand how you framed the summary in this case. But what happens is usually in Toastmasters, I usually tell a story. I tell my personal story. Take one point, tell a personal story. So when I conclude it, it is like, just do I need to, so that's why we need to address the generation gap. Or for example, if I have a story about a generation gap, so I tell what it is, and then my personal story, what challenges I faced, I fixed it. And before conclusion, before going to call for action, maybe open communication is required to fix the generation gap. I'm just telling some examples. So do I need to summarize the story? I mean, in a one-liner, or how is it?
I would say it will help if you give people cues that you're coming to a close. So I have heard in Toastmasters, this is used a lot. Well, in summation or in conclusion, right? Some people preface it like that. Most people don't talk in that in an informal setting, right? But that's very formal on the way to close. That's one way you could do it. But if you're telling a personal story, so if I look back at our sourdough example, the way I would close that particular story is I could now smell the sweet smell of sourdough bread. It brings me back. Remember, I'm just tying it back into where I started, right? It doesn't have to be very linear in that. It doesn't even have to be a lot. It could say, Hey, thanks for listening as I tell you about what I just told you about trying to communicate when there's a generational gap between audience members or students or people in Toastmasters. It really depends on the topic that you're going to be sharing. Because remember, this is one type of exercise to write a speech.
Oh, yeah.
Good question. Hopefully I answered it. I might not have gotten the full context that you were looking for. I do apologize, but by all means, feel free to unmute yourself, Mohan, if you want to follow up with that. Or if there's someone else that has a question, please unmute yourself. Let's see here. I don't see anybody else with hands raised.
Yeah. Hi, this is Maya here. I have a question. Yeah. See, when we talk about the introduction, body, and the conclusion, right? So when we say the body, then how do you make the transition, go to the next, I mean, to go to the conclusion? How do you do that?
So transition. Okay, so your question is how can I transition between different sections in my speech?
True.
Right. So it's not just from the body. It could apply wherever. So what I like to do is I like to tell people how I'm going to go from what I'm talking about now until the next section, right? So transitional phrases. One I've used, I think I used it twice tonight, was follow me over here. Right? It's just a few words, but it's a instruction or a direction to the audience. It doesn't have to be that dynamic as well, right? Some people just go from the body and then they say, I got to a certain point, now I'm going to shift, right? It depends on what you're really talking about. There could be, I mean, if you're for sort of like the last question that came in, if it's a personal story, sometimes there might not be a big transition. It might be a list of points. And then it was like, I got to this climax in my story. And then this is what I did. So it could even be like an and statement of I reached the plateau. And then I turned around and I saw how far I got, and I was amazed at how much progress I was able to make in 6 months, right? That could be the start of your conclusion. So remember, it's transitional phrases that you're going to look for, just to give subtle cues that you're going to change direction within your speech. Thank you, Maya. And let's see here, Helen, you have your hand raised, or actually, I'm sorry. If I look at it, Dash Ramakrishna, if I pronounce it right.
Ramakrishna, hey. Hello, everyone. So, given a topic, for example, which I'm not at all comfortable, or a topic which I'm not aware of, for example, someone is asking about my favorite musician, and I don't have any like music. I'm not a favorite to music. How do we generate the topic speech on the spot and address that, which we are not at all comfortable, but still the other person expecting the response from us?
Okay, that's a great question. So we'll restate it for everybody. You're presented with a question that you're not familiar with, or you don't have a lot of background or interest in, right? Well, if you're in the table topic section or impromptu, that's perfect because you could just choose something of yourself. But if you are subjected to give a speech on it and you don't have a favorite musician, do not enjoy any kinds of sounds. Maybe it's nature in the background, right? Maybe it's waterfalls, it's the sound of the sea crashing on the waves, or maybe it's just the silence if you're in the mountains and you hear snow dropping down, right? Maybe you don't have a favorite musician, but if you got to talk on that, well, one suggestion would be go analyze who your audience is. Do they like country music? Do they like rap music? Are they more into classical music? So if it's something that you're not comfortable with, well, see if you could change topic, A, or B, if you have time, try to do limited research, or C, and this is, it's up for interpretation, right? Or it's tell them don't have a favorite musician, you more of someone that likes maybe show tunes like The Biggest Showman, right? Or some sort of film, right? Or it could be sound effects.
Okay. Actually, this situation could happen when we're taking an exam for suppose, for example, IELTS for our academic or general category, right? Where they will be presenting a topic to you and you're asked to provide a presentation on it. For a speech for about 10 minutes on the same or 2 minutes on that some topic. So which we will not be able to narrate on the spot. So in that case, like it is not, we don't have enough time to prepare as well.
I've given many speeches like that. Especially when there was a book. Ashwin, I don't know if you remember, it was about a year ago. We were in Readership 101. And all the topics were on a book. And unfortunately, I didn't read. But I still had a speech prepared in the background to give that touched upon the themes of the book. I didn't know the details, but it was just about the themes. The rest of it, truthfully, I ad-libbed the entire thing. But once again, is someone going to be asking you, can you tell me how neurotransmitters fire across synapses in athletes that have brain injuries, right? That's some pretty complicated stuff. Maybe you don't know, but you may have to emulate something that could be close along or ask for a different topic. It all depends. I would say that anything that in a Speechcraft, most of the topics that you're going to be presented with are probably pretty relatable to 90% of people within the program. That's just what I've seen, but there could be those curveballs that you get. But I will say this, if you are presented with something and you have some time to do some research, send me an email. I'd be glad to give you some research points. Happy to help you wherever I can.
Sure, thanks.
Jay Kumar has
Kumar. Yes, hi.
I am, hello. Yeah, sorry, it took time to unmute. Thanks for wonderful framework and this speech. And this is really helpful. I just wanted to understand, like in the framework, you have told that in the introduction, we try to engage with the audience by question or something. So for short speech of 5 to 7 minutes, it might be okay. But like if we are giving longer speech, like around 30 minutes or so, so in between, how to keep the audience engaged? Any tips on that?
Well, okay, so I would say you have a two-part question, right? First part is if it's a short speech, how do you engage? Second one is if it's a long speech, how do you keep engagement with the audience? What I have found speaking in front of small, medium, and large audiences, it's very similar. It depends on how you're operating as that presenter. So number one, what I typically do, and I did it when we started, I typically start with some sort of question or bold statement, or I like to take people on the journey. So I start with like a memory or, hey, let's go back down memory lane. So that's typically one piece that you could use for audience engagement. Another one you may have seen. I did it earlier. I've actually done it the entire time. I've asked for your opinion as an audience member. Unmute yourself. I'd like to hear from you. I also ask questions. Sometimes I raised my hand. Other times I didn't. Those are still nonverbal cues if you're watching the screen. But what I did see is people nodding their head, just like Maya, she was just nodding her head, right? She's acknowledging that these things were said earlier. Those are different ways. Now, in the short speech, 5 to 7 minutes, it's very easy to keep people entertained. You could use different vocal variety, going up and down with your tone, maybe changing your pace. You could also move around the screen, right? I'm standing in front of my desk. It's like an elevator desk that goes up and down. You could do that if you're sitting in front of the desk. A lot of people kind of swivel back and forth. That gets highly distracting, but people kind of can engage on that. Now, the other one is you could also pause. Now, the pause is uncomfortable silence. And a lot of us, when we speak too fast or think too quickly and we can't formulate the words to come out of our mouth, we're going to use a lot of filler words, right? But if you're on a long 30-minute pause, I'm sorry, a 30-minute presentation, as you're talking on stage, you might inject more silence within your presentation because you want people to hear and hang on what you're talking about. You want them to really understand and really gauge and gather or critically think about whatever topic it is. So pausing definitely helps. You could interact with the audience like I did earlier tonight, right? Everything that you're asking, we've done throughout this presentation, if you haven't really realized that, was ask the audience a question. Hey, what do you guys think about this? Hear one or two things, keep silent, and then move in a different direction. Those are several things. I mean, there's probably a ton of other things. I know Helen Josephine, I've worked with her in the past. She's got a lot of tips. She's great at keeping people interested. Ashvin, Raghu, a bunch of other people on the call as well. So I'm not the only one that's going to share those things. They may have other ideas as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Anytime.
Yeah.
Do you have time for asking more questions?
Yes, if you guys want to pepper me with more questions, Ashwin, you're giving me the thumbs up. Keep going. Let's do it.
Few more.
Yep.
Now they have to put all this to use, right? They can't just absorb everything. So
yeah, this is from my experience based. I mean, a pain point, what I felt while giving my speech, preparing my speeches. So just I saw it a picture in the beginning, right? I used to write pages, several pages whenever I went for this Toastmaster speech. I could see myself there. I mean, there are predominantly two reasons why I used to write a lot. One is that I want to present some good content, the finest of the content. So I don't want to miss even a very small point.
Yep.
So I wanted to recollect or just make sure that audience get the very good finest content from my side. In that pursuit, sometimes I may not feel authentic. I may look like I'm recollecting something or, so that is one point. And the second, how to memorize all this. I can write something and, I'm a very good writer. I write it. But when I have to recollect, right, that's where I feel, and I have this, what you call the perfection mentality. I want to, whatever, I feel proud of my speech. I am sure that this is the best content anybody can present in my club. I want to replicate each and every point there. So in that pursuit, I may, sometime may not look authentic or thinking somewhere. yeah. And I also write several times just to memorize it several times so that it will be strongly imprinted in my mind. It comes as if it is a natural flow.
I completely recognize that because that has been my plight for the longest time. But I'll tell you a little secret that I learned from one of my mentors about 4.5 years ago. Tony Watley, he's a professional speaker, businessman, author, etc. He's the guy that actually got me into Toastmasters. And it didn't start with Toastmasters and becoming comfortable in front of the camera and speaking off the cuff and being authentic. It actually started with this cell phone. Every single person in this room, probably 3 to 4 people in your family, all have them. It has a record button on here like I'm doing now. I've been recording for 47 minutes of me on this speech. Now, how do you use the cell phone? Every speech that I go out and do, I turn the record on and I face it selfie mode and I speak into the camera. So right up here, I got behind the scene, I got 3 dots up here so I could see where my audience would be if I'm in person. But I'm gonna record myself on this phone. I'm gonna start with the first minute, that intro.
I recorded audio. I just don't, sorry to interrupt. I just record my voice, but not the video. Do you think it is required? I mean, the video part, or does it add more value? Or
I will recommend 1000%. If you put it on camera, when you replay it, you're going to be looking at all the cues, nonverbal and verbal. You're going to be the worst critic of yourself. I'll guarantee that because I know I was. But the cool thing is you do this for 7 days in a row. Go record yourself for a minute at a time, looking at it, talk about whatever you want. Use the framework of 3 cubed. Later that night, not right after, but later that night, go out and watch it. And then start identifying where was your voice at? Was it high? Was it low? Was it slow? Was it fast? Look at where your eyes are looking at. Look at how your gesture, and then pay attention to what you're saying. Did you choose the right word to describe it, right? Because we're all, like you said, we're all about perfection, right? Well, guess what?
Yeah.
This right here, if I open up my phone, I kid you not, I got something like 10,000 different short videos that range from 3 seconds to 45 minutes in length. Sometimes it's 100 takes every single day. I'm not kidding you. You think I'm lying. I'm not kidding you. But the reason why I do that and why I did it is it got me to where I could stand up in front of an audience and someone could fire a question at me. I didn't have to like search my brain. I just had to turn something on and say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to record this. I'm just going to spit it out there. If it doesn't come out right, I'm going to look at it later. But I've done the work just like you're going to start doing after this session, right? Start recording your speeches. Like literally, here's the exercise you guys just did on paper. I took the notes down from the gentleman that talked about organic foods, right? Now, in using the phone, all it takes is say 3 to 5 minutes or practice your speech. I kid you not, there were some days I must have recorded that same segment 25, 30 times.
Amazing. Maybe, yeah.
And
I'm not that level of perfection.
I only wrote on 1 piece of paper that day, opposed to the 10,000 that I threw in the garbage over here, right?
I have
but
a bunch
it's
of
practice.
paper.
It's practice. That's all it is.
Yeah, maybe I need to change my approach. Less paper and more videos.
Well, the videos help you hear, right?
Yeah.
They help you hear. And the cool thing about here is when you take this to your home or your business or your friends, it doesn't matter that you're on camera. Now you're even more confident because behind this is just invisible, right? I think the same thing when I sit in front of people. You know, it's no different to me nowadays, whether if I'm in front of them and the camera or if I'm there. But believe me, and I kid you not, this right here is also a secret sauce. Record yourself really quick. I'll give a recap for everybody. I know we're pressed for time. Is take out your phone, have some sort of speech written, whether if it's a few bullet points or 10 pages, whatever. Read it in small segments, record yourself, go back, rewatch it, evaluate what you did because you are the biggest critic of yourself, right? And your opinion, believe it or not, is the only one that matters. It's the only one, right? Because if you could stand it, then it's all right to say it later on. And yeah, someone else may say something else. But if you could digest what you're saying, you're all right. And do this for 7 days in a row. Get comfortable. And believe me, we all have 5 minutes in our day. I mean, Ashwin told you about the 25 jobs that I have right now, right? Many of you are probably parents, have kids, work, all this other things. Same thing here. But you know what? I got 5 minutes while I'm sitting at the red light. I'll go back, I'll watch it again. And then over time, I'm going to dial that speech in, but I'm going to play with the words over time to where I am authentically giving it. I'm not reciting the words on my page. That's the value that I found in using video to record my speech, Mohan.
Yeah, thanks. Good input.
Yep.
Thank you, Stephen. I know, Vinu, you have your hands raised, but just for time, we're gonna
we can
a little
take
break. We take one more.
One question okay. And close it.
Okay, excellent. Vinu, go ahead.
I have a question. Maya here.
Vinu has raised his hand, so we'll go with that, and then Maya.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Vinu.
Yeah, Stephen, I have a question. Suppose I just want to hear from you. When you are giving your online speeches, you will be focusing on your camera, right? But when you are giving your offline speech or physical speeches, there you will be more focus on the audience, right? So did you see any difference in both the speeches, or according to you, both will require the same efforts? And
well, there are different mediums altogether, right? So when you're online like this, behind my camera, I have something set up with 3 boxes. These are the direction of the people in the audience if I was on a stage or in a podium in a conference room, right? And so when I'm addressing people in person, I'm going to move my head a little more, right? Because you're going to individually acknowledge the people in the audience, opposed to just most of the time I'm staring at the camera this way. I might look off because I got notes on the side. So there's going to be a little bit different. Also, something different that's magical when you're in front of people is the atmosphere, the vibe. You could pick up the different cues of people tapping their desks or their foot, they're wrestling with their pants or clothes. You might not see that online, right? And so some of those things, they just fade into the background. But when you're live, those things could amplify your speech, or they could be distractors, right? Because remember, when you're in person, if someone coughs, if someone moves their chair, there might be those squeaks. Notice here, most of the time, everybody's on mute. So you might not have those things, but those are good because that's how life operates when you're not on camera, right? So you got to get used to those things, but there is some differences there.
Maya, one last question. Thank you, Vinu.
Yeah, thank you. In the speech outline, you mentioned about the building credibility. Can you please elaborate more on that? How do we build the credibility?
Let's see here. Your question was, in the intro section, how do you build credibility?
Yes.
So I have a question for you. Are you an expert in the topic that you're giving?
Yes.
Okay, there's your answer right there. When you're talking, you're going to want to speak with authority, right? We, as the audience members, believe that you know what you're talking about. So you may decide to use different cues or background information to reinforce what you're talking about. So in my example of the sourdough bread company, Bodine, I stuck anchors of San Francisco, Bodine, bread maker, right? I'm using descriptive language that you could now pinpoint with. I also put a time frame of when it was happening, when I was a young boy and then when I visited later on. You could do the same thing when you're giving a speech. Let's say it's at your work. Hey, I've been running the numbers for 2 years, or we've looked at the data. Here's all the different metrics that we found and the measures that we're looking at, right? It's all about how you're describing your position on the topic to build credibility. So those are some of the examples that I'd suggest. Now, I know my time is up. I just put my email in the chat. If you have any other questions, if you want me to look at a speech, give you some pointers, whatever the case is, you want me to send a copy of that outline framework, send me an email. I'm not going to sell you anything. Don't worry about that. But I'm here to offer whatever help I can during and after the entire Speechcraft that's being hosted tonight and over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Ashwin.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Give a hand for Stephen. And I hope you guys learned something. Well, you got to put that to use. Well, you're going to do that next. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. And in the meantime,
before that, just want to present this to Stephen.
Oh
Stephen,
my gosh.
Thanks.
You got that grand prize.
You're both at dramatic.
Sorry, we couldn't get the car, Stephen. It's not in our budget, but here you go.
Yeah.
It's all right. I know the car is on layaway and I'm happy to pay taxes on it before I get it. But no, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. If you have any questions, reach out. Happy to help anybody here.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Is that correct?
Yes, and we'll pause the recording. You can pause the recording.
Yes.